Hello and welcome everybody, and thank you guys for joining me into the next episode of my Shadow Arena Beginner's Guide. My name is Wilkie and we're going to be talking about combat. Offensive traits, defensive traits, all those things that come into place. And we're also going to start off with probably one, if not the most controversial topic in the whole game, or in the whole game's mechanics, which is the so-called Autoattackstagger, Hitstun, whatever else you want to call it. I guess the best example or comparison I can draw here is towards a fighting game. If you get hit in a fighting game like Street Fighter, Tekken, something like this, your character flinches and is in a so-called state of hit stun. You can't really do anything because you're getting hit at, not in a good way. So whenever you get punched, kicked, whatever, your character cannot move. And the same principle applies to this game. And I will show you what this means. And also, auto attacks do interrupt other auto attacks as well as abilities as long as they don't have any protection on them. We will cover the topic of protection in just a second as well. Let's just show you this example here. Alright, we'll have this Guyen start with his auto attacks. His auto attacks are very slow, but Dahl's on the other hand are very quick. So I will use this to elaborate on this example here. This is what Guyen's auto attacks do look like. As long as he's not interrupted, he will start swinging left to right. If I start punching as Badal, and as you can see, my auto attacks are much quicker than his swings, he will consistently start to wind up, but he is not really able to get any of his auto attacks in consistently. And this is one of the few issues where I think a lot of people either don't know it or start button mashing and get very frustrated because they don't see any results. It's like essentially a fighting game. If you have somebody who knows his strings and his frame data, and you try to just randomly punch something in there, you're not going to get through. And the same principle applies here. This is something that is very apparent in fighting games, but not so common in MMOs or BRs like this. Also keep in mind, delays do factor in there, so there's always a chance that certain things may get interrupted despite not being hit in time, or something may look different on your screen and vice versa. The main kicker though, or the biggest issue here, is that auto attacks can also interrupt abilities, unless they are protected. And for example, if we have Guyen use his Gatekeeper, which is his right click, which has super armor, I'm going to position myself here. So if we have him hold his right click, and I start punching him, you can see this little bull icon. This means you have protection. There's only two forms of protection in this game, one being super armor, the other one being so-called avoid mode, which essentially is an iframe, an invincibility frame. I will put this on the screen. It's not invisibility. This is something also a lot of people, I mean, the wording here is very confusing, truth be told. Generally though, invisibility means you're just not visible. People cannot see you, but you're still physically there. Invincibility, on the other hand, means you're essentially not there. You can still be visible, but you have a state where you can't be touched, hit, or something like this. I guess the best example for this is after you get a kill. I will put some footage of this here. If you score a kill in the game, you get this buff for a few seconds. And if you have this buff on, you cannot be CC'd by anybody. All the CC you will get hit by will not have any effect. And if somebody tries to hit you or grab you, it will pop up as being in avoid mode. So these are the forms of protection. Other forms of iframes or invincibility are, for example, Ahon Kyros's Phantom Raven. It's also listed on the skill here, Invincible, and she is invincible and also invisible. So this is one of the occasions where these effects combine, but they can go perfectly fine without one or another. For example, Haru can be invisible, but she's not invincible, and vice versa. So if you time this move right here, you will not be hit by something. For example, if we have this guy use, this Jardine just use a spear, and you saw that we just perfectly fine dodged this one. Obviously, this requires timing. The last thing I want to talk about here in terms of iframes is that the shift roll does have invincibility. For whatever reason, it's not reliable. We don't know. There's countless clips of me and other people dodging with shift rolls. Apparently the devs claim it's not there, but I perfectly think that it is there. Check this clip here. You can clearly see that I was in the center of this explosion and I did not get hit because I timed my dodge right. So it definitely is there. The last form of protection is a simple shield block or a guard mode. Jardine and Venslar currently being the only ones having a shield and the only option to block. This is simply done by holding a certain button, and as you can see here, hitting these people will pop up this shield icon. However, they do have a shield gauge or a block bar, and whenever you break this one, they will stop blocking and will be flinched backwards. Now, the main thing here is, I showed you that this bull icon pops up. The main problem here is, well, Badal's auto attacks are very quick. So if we start punching, you saw that this worked. There are moments though where this won't work. And I will show you footage here of this as well. You just saw that the skill went on cooldown despite having super armor. It just didn't get through. And sometimes it means the skill doesn't have super armor and on the startup. Though generally, you do have to give the game a few frames for your protective abilities to kick in before you can reliably use them. This is, as I said, very important to understand this concept. Autoattackstagger is a thing. We don't know if they will ever remove it. On a personal note, I don't think they will, but a lot of people complain about it. So maybe there will be changes in the future. Right now, though, it is in the game, and it's very important to know that it's there, that auto attacks can do stagger you. This is essentially important on heroes with very long windups. Guyen, I use it as a main example because it's very clearly visible on this one here. Pay attention to what the enemy is doing. Know what the enemy's attack speed is like when he has gaps in his string. For example, Badal has very few punches that are quick, and the last one has a very long windup. So if I know this, then I know that I'm not going to be starting to use any moves while he's in his flurry of punches. But whenever he does the last sort of downwards or like the uppercut hook thing, this is the moment, for example, where you have a window where there's nothing to get interrupted by. Learn this and understand the concept of hitstun and that super armor does not always protect you. This is something that can be a little bit infuriating or sometimes causes a lot of frustration. Because even though you technically have the frame state that should be protective, or you have the edge, you can still get desynced out of this. This is something you just have to come by with. Some things can be learned, some things can be sort of countered, or you get a feeling, you know, alright, Guyen has a slow attack speed, so there's usually not that much risk of getting interrupted. Badal, Yonhua, things like this, or heroes like that, have very quick attacks, so there is a very good chance that my skills may get interrupted if I use them at the wrong time. So keep this in mind. This is very important to understand on the concept of Autoattackstagger and Hitstun. So next up, we're going to list all of the available CCs in the game. The first one I want to talk about is Stiffness, which essentially is only available on Dark Shift. Truth be told, I don't exactly know what this one does, so I'm not going to be covering it because I simply didn't know. The next one on the list is a stun. There's multiple variations of stuns. The most common one is out of Dark Shift. It looks like the enemy is holding his head and he's sort of like a little bit of a confused state. There is one thing to note about stuns though, that stuns will get removed when you hit an enemy afterwards with whatever ability that's gonna be used. Meaning, if you stun an enemy with your Q and you don't follow up with a CC, there is a chance that they will get out of your combo or they will retaliate with anything else. So keep this in mind. Stun, and the other one that does that is freeze. Stuns and freeze will get removed if you hit the enemy afterwards. This is also listed in the patch notes here. I'm gonna put this one in here. This is very important to understand in terms of comboing, especially for heroines, because they are the only ones currently having a freeze in the game. If you freeze an enemy and you start hammering at them, you do have to know how to follow up, because otherwise they will get out of the combo. So the other forms of CC, the probably most dominant one being a knockdown. It essentially does what it says. It knocks the enemy on the ground with a very small lifting animation. However, keep in mind though, it highly depends on the skill how long the knockdown lasts. For example, Badal has a knockdown on his kick or F. It's an okay knockdown, but if you compare it to the duration of the grab, for example, this one lasts much longer. There is no clear answer to what CC lasts how long depending on the state, but each CC has a different timing. Even though they all have knockdowns, for example, they all have different timings. The only thing you can do here is either look up a combo people already figured out, or go into practice mode and use all of the available CCs to you and learn their timings. Learning and knowing how long the CCs actually last allows you to string combos together that are not dodgeable by E or other movements. So understanding and knowing which CC can be followed up with what or how many hits is very crucial in order to make your combos successful, especially in the heat of battle. The next thing is a knockback. Fairly straightforward, knocks the enemy back for a little bit or staggers them a little bit. Not really one of the hard CCs, I'd like to call them, but it can be useful to interrupt them, and certain heroes might have a better use. So the next thing on the list is called a blowback, and this one is what happens, for example, on Badal on his grab. So the second hit here spirals the enemy away into a fairly long distance. Depending on the move, the distance might be shorter or longer. This is sort of a mixed type of CC. Some heroes have a very easy time to follow this one up, some others don't. Having a wall or something that blocks the enemy trajectory can be very useful. For example, if we see this brazier here in front of me, if I use the grab here, even though the enemy spirals forward, he will get blocked by any obstacle. Knowing this allows you to combo at certain places much easier. Walls, for example, any obstacle, staircases as well, do help you in this regard. Knowing this allows blowbacks to be much more effective. Likewise, if you're at the slope and the enemy might spiral downwards, blowbacks have the tendency to not function very well. So there is a little bit of risk involved, but this most of the time it can be negated if you practice very well and know how it's looking. But there can be times where you're not able to hit it. The next thing I want to show you is floating, which knocks the enemy up in the ground and then leaves them, knocks the enemy up in the air and then leaves them leaving on the ground. Has a similar animation on the ground, for example, compared to a knockdown. Only the fact that the enemy gets lifted upwards for that. We also covered the freeze from Heroine, for example. The last thing I want to talk about is a grab. However, a grab is a little bit of a special type of CC, I guess. The first special property of grabs is that it can break super armor. What that means is we already tested that Gatekeeper has super armor, so punching gets me the bull icon, but grab ignores this. So you can grab people out of super armor. However, you cannot grab people out of iframes, and you cannot grab people out of the avoid mode if you get a kill. Likewise, invisible heroes, most notably Yeonhwa's Red Moon ability or Haru's 4 ability, you are not invincible but invisible during those movements. If somebody tends to grab you and the hitboxes connect, you will still get grabbed regardless of your state. So there's that. Also, why I think grab is a little bit of a special thing, because the grab in itself always ends in any other form of CC. For example, Badal's unenhanced grab has a knockback to it. As I showed you earlier, if I enhance it, it can either have a knockdown or a blowback. Schultz, on the other hand, always results in a knockdown afterwards. So depending on the type of grab you use, the actual CC effect afterwards is different, but the grab still has the same properties as getting people out of their combo, out of super armor, or simply stringing your things together. So a few pieces of information here. CCs do not have anything from other games that is called DR or diminishing returns. Usually games have this sort of system in place to prevent people from comboing people until they die. However, Shadow Arena does not have this kind of mechanic. Usually DR either affects damage and or CC durations. A very dominant example is World of Warcraft, where using the same type of CC over and over again will result in shorter CC times, at some point not even CCing at all. Other games, for example, pretty much every fighting game, the longer your combo is, the less damage you will deal. So at the start, your damage is kind of 100%, and the more hits you deal to the enemy and the longer the combo is, the less damage you will deal overall. Shadow Arena doesn't have any of these systems in place, at least not to our knowledge. So CC durations and damage is not affected by how long you juggle the enemy, meaning the longer you can juggle them and the better your skill chaining is gonna be, the more damage you can deal without having to fear any repercussions of running into DR either on damage or CC duration. The last thing I want to talk about during combat is something called Backattacks, which is a modifier that increases damage. So if you look at this, whenever you hit somebody in the back, and don't get confused because the enemy was actually facing backwards, it was just the game bugging out, you do deal a lot more damage. So let's do 2 auto attacks, and you can see roughly, I don't know, 1 centimeter or something of the HP gone. If we do 2 auto attacks from the front, you can see that this is significantly less damage. So let's do a full string. Boom. You can see that there's significantly less damage, and we'll do one more example here again. 1 string from the back. Takes her almost exactly to the A of the name Shenna, and let's reset this one here. So you can pretty much see how much damage we're going to be dealing from the front. This is significantly less damage. So I think back attacks actually do add like a 50% damage increase. We don't have hard numbers, but generally we could number crunch. Still though, dealing back attacks is very good, and I will show you a clip here. It's essentially very, very good to try and get back attacks going in PvE if you try to hunt Shadow Lords, because it will increase your kill speed significantly. So this finally concludes my beginner's guide on the combat section of the game. I know there's a lot of information, and as usual I will put the timestamps to all of these sections in the video in the description below so you can jump around freely. As usual, if there's anything else that you have trouble understanding that I may have not made very clear, maybe something still confusing, you still have trouble pinning down something, then feel free to let me know as usual in the comments section below. I will create the playlist now, since we now have 2 videos of this, and the next videos will most likely be released, at least 1 or 2 next week. As far as res goes, as usual, hit me up on any social media of your personal preference. I will probably stream maybe on Monday a little bit again, so you can also catch me playing live there if you want to see some live gameplay and want to get into direct contact with me. As far as res goes, thanks everybody for being here. Hopefully this did help somebody. And as always, I will see you guys next time.